Hi folks, Germany has its Klassiker between Bayern and Dortmund this weekend. Italy boasts a meeting of Juventus and AC Milan, the two most titled teams in the country. But the most high quality contest in Europe in terms of modern day pedigree has to be the meeting of Liverpool and Manchester City at Anfield. But that's just one of the subjects up for debate on a busy show, as we'll focus on where the battle of England's best sides is likely to be won and lost, the defence. But we'll also look back at a highly satisfactory Thursday night for the English and Scottish clubs in Europe. And we'll preview the rest of the Premier League weekend as the Flying Foxes prepare to face embattled Emery and Arsenal. As ever, get your feedback in. It's a big part of the show. And because it's such a huge game at Anfield this weekend, I've gone on Twitter and I've put out a poll there for you. Quite straightforward. What happens in this clash between Liverpool and City? I've offered you three options there: Liverpool win, City win, or the draw. As I said, I was tempted to add the option game to be ruined by VAR, but I don't want to tempt fate and give you that one there. Right, I'll give you the result of that one very, very shortly. Speaking about that game, who better to join us today than Melissa Reddy, who is about to head off to listen to the thoughts of Jurgen Klopp. Heading out into the cold, I know, to do that, but what a game. Are you expecting fireworks at these press conferences?
I am indeed. Both managers have been asked about each other's comments. They'll be asked about the respective players' comments as well. It is a massive rivalry given what's at stake. So I am expecting quite an interesting press conference. All
right, we look forward to reading about that one. We'll talk about that game in just a moment. Before we do that, let's look back at Thursday night and one game from Wednesday night of Europa League action, which generally went very well for the British clubs. Arsenal, frustration for them after an otherwise serene progress in this competition. Sevilla, one of the sides that ensured their qualification for the knockout round with that win over Dudelange. Espanyol had six different goal scorers in a 6-0 victory there. Celtic, magnificent result for them. Rangers, likewise, 2-0 at home to Porto. Jimenez, the hero, having been involved in an injury nightmare against Slovan Bratislava. Gladbach beating Roma 2-1. And Manchester United qualifying with their 3-0 thumping of Partizan, which is where we're going to start right now, because for once, some really bright news. The best thing about them this season has been their strike force, but you add Greenwood to the Martial-Rashford axis, and suddenly they're looking really, really good. Scorer of an excellent goal. Mel, I'd welcome your take on this one. You know, with United, we tend to flip-flop in terms of our thoughts from game to game, but it's undeniable that if this kid Greenwood plays and they can supply him and the others, they are going to score goals, right?
Yeah, we've spoken about him on this show actually before, and the high ceiling he has. United played yesterday the way the fans expect them to play, the way you expect in general of a United side. Excellent ambition, enterprising play, a lot of cohesion between them. And you almost feel like you don't want to praise them too much or go over the top because you don't know when the next disappointment is coming. But if they can consistently produce that, I think their supporters will be more than happy.
Yeah, it was also noteworthy that Ashley Young was very high up in the pitch and involved in their attacking play, and maybe that's something they need to work on, whoever plays in those fullback slots. Let's just quickly remind ourselves what happened. Wolves, they're so resilient, Wolves. They tend to start games slowly and then score late on. They just keep doing it, but yet again, they've got the job done. There's a lot to like about them. I'm going to move on to Arsenal right now, because the previous night they found themselves up against Vitória of Portugal, and they must have thought they'd won it. Goal from unlikely source, and then what happens? They're pegged back, which just adds to the frustration for Unai Emery. Mel, where do you think this story is going with Emery? I mean, you know, elsewhere we're talking about Leicester and their prospects of beating Arsenal for a third straight home Premier League game when they meet this weekend. Do you think Emery's under threat?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, nothing seems right at Arsenal, not his messaging. Even when he speaks about, you know, his tactical beliefs, nothing seems to be fitting. And I think one of the biggest issues is he lacks authority in terms of just in general, in everything. You know, the issue about the captaincy, whenever he's asked to explain something, there's just a sense that he doesn't command his players or his messaging, just anything in general. And this was a problem he had at PSG as well, and we see it repeating. I know Arsenal, because of the structure that they have behind the scenes now post-Arsenal, they're dead set on getting a manager who could fit into those structures and not rock the boat too much. But I think what they have now is one that's not authoritative enough either to sort of lead them through this transition period.
All right, yeah, it's a really interesting point you make there. What do they do there? Okay, let's move on to the Premier League right now. This is the way things line up. Later on tonight, Norwich City against Watford. That one actually has seen two sides lose their way in front of goal, but I'm expecting goals in that one. Working our way through here, so much to look forward to. Elsewhere, we'll be talking about some of these games later on. All eyes, of course, are drawn to Liverpool against Manchester City. And with that in mind, if we take a little look only at the top of the table, I'll talk about the rest later on. That's the gap as it stands. So we could find ourselves with a 9-point gap, a 6, a 3, whatever. So how significant is it? I want to get into this chat right now about what this game is about. Earlier on this week, we addressed all of those things, all of those headlines, all of that talk about rivalry, and we tried to work out whether or not there's going to be mind games and a war of words or anything like that. Well, no. Because Jurgen Klopp's already come out and said, look, this is not a title decider. It cannot be. It's too early in the season for this one. So he's played it down. This was an article in The Guardian today saying it's a bit of rivalry, but it's a rivalry without true bite yet. Of course, it is the champions of Europe against the champions of England. We know that much. Now, this, of course, was Sadio Mane, who even took what could be an incendiary situation and sort of made a joke about it. And he sort of said, yeah, it was clever of Pep, wasn't it, to basically talk about the referees or let the referees know about this one. Anyway, the one area that could turn out to be incendiary, quite literally, is if there's a repeat of what happened 18 months ago in the Champions League context when City, who are worried about this, come under siege from Liverpool fans as they arrive at Anfield. Now, Mel, this is the one area I'd like to just start with. You know, I want to do the big issue chat here, the big thematic talk about this game. That thing about Liverpool's reception could be a concern, couldn't it?
The goalless draw last season at Anfield went out without a hitch. I think in terms of that Champions League game when the bus incident did take place, we had to look at the build-up of that, you know, City saying they didn't want Liverpool fans to welcome the Liverpool bus in, and Liverpool fans were very antagonistic about that. Why are you telling us why we can't do this? So the atmosphere or the air that was created leading up to that wasn't the healthiest. Obviously, the change in routes and the publicizing of all that. So there were a lot of things that weren't handled correctly then. We saw it rectified at Anfield last season, and there's been a lot of bus welcomes at Anfield that has gone off without a hitch. So Liverpool and Merseyside police are not expecting any trouble this weekend.
All right. Just before we take a break and then regroup and talk about the match itself, give me your take on this rivalry. Because, okay, it's not the bitter toxicity that we saw from Ferguson and Wenger, Benitez and Ferguson, Mourinho and Wenger, whatever. There's not that. What is this rivalry?
It's not historic and it's not based on animosity. What it is the two best teams in England at the moment, and actually, in my opinion, in Europe at the moment, existing in the same time with two high-class managers, and that's what this all boils down to.
All right, Mel, we'll get into that in some detail, as I said, tactically in just a moment. Feedback from you guys, and there's lots flooding in already. Raymond Lowe says, first versus second, Premier League champions versus European champions, world football's two finest managers head-to-head, diving, tactical fouls, mind games, football matches don't come any bigger than this one. Bring it on. I think we're all saying that, Raymond. Gan Tianeng, Liverpool must take early leads in matches and consolidate those leads instead of chasing from behind, because time and luck will eventually run out on them. Besides, the Reds can defend leads better than the Gunners. Okay, well, let's not bring them into it right now, but we will bring defence into it, and we'll get Mel's thoughts on what she thinks might happen in this game when we come back. Okay, we're off to a very bright start in this one so far. Thanks very much for joining us. Keep your comments coming in. We'll get them away if we can, but there's a lot to get through. We're going to look at squad rotation. We're going to look at recent history in this fixture. We're going to take a little look at the defensive records of both of these clubs as we try and work out what might happen when Liverpool host Manchester City in the huge game this weekend at Anfield. As I said, keep those comments coming in. More from me and Melissa Reddy in just a moment. Liverpool fans, here's your chance to win big. Standard Chartered knows all about your passion for the Reds here in Asia. Staying up late or waking up early to watch Jurgen Klopp's team in Premier League action proves what true fans you are. Now, Standard Chartered's giving you a chance to win a trip to Stand Red at Anfield itself. And all you have to do is go to foxsportsasia.com/standred and tell us in 25 words or less who's your favourite Liverpool player and why. And you might just be the one singing You'll Never Walk Alone with the Kop. I can tell you the first competition winners will be heading over to Anfield very, very soon. So that is really something to look forward to. OK, let's get into the head-to-head between Liverpool and Manchester City. If we look back over the last 6 competitive meetings here, well, you have to sort of say, OK, there was that extraordinary 5-0 at the Etihad a little while back in 2017. Otherwise, though, we've seen the meeting in the European stage, in the Premier League stage, and the one thing we do know is that when it comes to games at Anfield, Liverpool cannot be faulted. So in we go to the last time City went there and won. 2003, 16 years ago, the last time they went there at Anfield. And just out of interest, Anelka was the one who scored the 2 goals that did it. Let's have a little look at exactly who was involved on the day to give you a sense of how long ago this was. Schmeichel in goal, there's a talking point. David Somé, Dunn, Distan, Jensen, Wright Phillips, Horlock, Ali Benabir, Joey Barton, Robbie Fowler and Nicholas Anelka. That's a good strike force, isn't it? Anyway, that was then. Let's get to Mel Reddy, who's with us today, and she's going to give me a sense of a mental block, if it exists for Manchester City. I mean, obviously you talk about generations and a sea change in what City became, but it's still a tough place to go. No one's done it for, 45 games in the Premier League and won there?
Yeah, it was quite interesting last season because Guardiola came to Anfield and was actually set up to be obstructive. It wasn't the usual, gloves off encounter between these two sides where it's all out attack. And, based on transition, it wasn't that Guardiola was quite guarded. And that was the first sign, for me anyway, that he felt Liverpool were the closest challengers City would have in the title race last season. Obviously, that's now escalated because of Liverpool only missing out on the league by a point, going on to become European champions, and then building up that 6-point gap at the start of this season. So will it be tense again as it was at Anfield, or will they revert to we're the 2 best teams in the land, let's just go at it and see who comes up on top? I can't imagine the latter.
No, I don't think so, slugging it out. Let's have a little look at the teams that they've been picking lately. We'll start off with Liverpool, work our way through rotation via the game against Aston Villa last weekend. Now, OK, so we remember that one. Let's change it on instead to what they did in midweek, because always we were looking at what would happen here. I've just highlighted the changes. Players coming in: Gomez, Wijnaldum, Milner, Fabinho, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Origi. More changes made by Liverpool as they took on Genk, because Pep Guardiola said that from their game against Southampton last weekend, going into what he did in midweek against Atalanta, he wasn't going to weaken significantly. He said, this is not a time to start focusing on Anfield. I'm going to go with as strong a team as I can. But that said, he rotated his front 3 quite dramatically. All right, Mel, what do we read into what happened in either of those games? Because we'll notice that the key players on the bench actually did get some game time in midweek as well. Are you expecting any major tactical shake-ups?
On the Liverpool end, the only changes I can see conceivably happening to alter Jurgen Klopp's big game thinking, we know for the clashes that mean the most, he chooses a midfield of Fabinho, Jordan Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum. The only change I could see is Oxlade-Chamberlain coming in for one of Wijnaldum or Henderson, potentially Henderson, who was suffering with illness, because City do not like a runner from midfield, a ball carrier, and somebody who wants to engage his markers. Chamberlain does that. They've struggled to play against him before. Prior to his long-term injury, the last 2 goals he scored were in games against City. In 2018, he was basically unplayable against them. The other player, Joe Gomez, who's quicker than Lovren. Obviously, Joel Matip is out. We don't expect him to play. So it's a toss-up between those two, but Gomez is quicker and is better in the air, so he's a potential one to come in. For Manchester City, you'd expect Aguero to come back in. You'd see them playing their strongest lineup. I know there were question marks over Edison, but like Jurgen Klopp said, he 100% expects him to play.
Now, let's turn our attention to the defences and see if that gives us a clue as to what might happen this weekend. This was Alisson, the Liverpool goalkeeper, in the Liverpool Echo this week saying, come on, we need to cut out these sloppy goals. But elsewhere in that paper this week, they said we might be able to get at City. It was an online article which you can track down in which they listed a whole bunch of goals that City have conceded this year and given it as a suggestion of ways that Liverpool might find a way to get through them. One thing we do know is if we take a little look at Liverpool's goals against and expected goals against, you will find that after a superb performance last time out, they're a little bit sloppier. Alisson is right. They're not quite performing to the standards that they would have wanted to. So there's been a change there. The most marked change, though, has come for Manchester City, because as good as Liverpool were last season, you'll find that Manchester City really were outstanding as well. And that might have been surprisingly so. This has been the big change, though, in terms of goals against and expected goals against. Something is not quite right defensively there, and in Laporte's absence, that's obviously a major issue for them. All right, now let's get into this one. We talk in superlatives when we talk about both of these sides right now. You've spoken about Oxlade-Chamberlain, another offensive weapon for Liverpool. But defensively, that's where we have key personnel missing, isn't it? And that surely has to be where we could see vulnerability. Whose defence do you think stands up strongest?
Both teams are actually more vulnerable than they were last season, and it's been quite tangible, and the opposition have been playing on that. Liverpool tend to be more steely, though, and they don't leave themselves exposed. So you'd expect Liverpool in this matchup to be the more defensively superior. And to be honest, in terms of the goals Liverpool have conceded this season, a lot of them have come in the Champions League and in the League Cup.
Yeah.
In the Premier League, they're only one off Sheffield United and Leicester, who have the best defensive record. They've conceded 8. Liverpool have conceded 9. So there's not that much of a swing in the league. City have been quite vulnerable without Laporte, and in general, City's best form of defense has been their attack. And you've seen that recede slightly. So you do expect Liverpool to have the upper hand in that respect. However, as Alisson said, Liverpool's concentration hasn't been what it should be. And so they do find themselves conceding quite lax goals.
Yeah, there is that. Right, OK, so many factors here. Now, do we go down the route of neither manager really wants to lose this one? Doesn't matter too much what happens in terms of a win, so we get another 0-0. Or do you think, given the attacking pedigree on show, somebody has to win this game? If so, who?
I think they're both going to be very, very safe, risk-averse, because neither wants to lose. They keep saying it's not, it doesn't have a bearing on the title race, but it does. They know it does. It came down to 1 point last season. So neither wants to lose it, but because it's Anfield, because of Liverpool's psychological sort of superiority on the ground, you'd expect them to steal a result if one of the teams has to win.
Mel, thank you very much. I'll let you get away. See you again soon. Already there, and your feedback continues to come in here. Right, Johnny Michael Tan, a 9-point gap for Liverpool will provide breathing space for them, meandering through the crazy November-December schedule. That's a good point. Yeah, that's certainly not to be sniffed at. Django Ang, however, says this: Liverpool have reached the peak too soon. A defeat against City could mean they could be heading downhill. Expect City to beat them. Okay, keep those comments coming. I know what you expect, at least those of you who voted in my Twitter poll. You expect Liverpool to win. 52% went with the Liverpool win, 35% with a Manchester City win, and only 13% with the draw. That surprises me slightly. Judging by what Mel just said, judging by how I see this one, I could see that one being a draw. Okay, that's the big game of the week. We'll come back with my weekend watch and some focus on a few of the other matches next. Thanks for all your comments on Liverpool-Manchester City, but of course it's a full programme of Premier League games, and we'll be talking about 4 in some detail. Elsewhere on this Facebook page you can find my Just One Thing with stats on all the matches, so if you've got any comments on any of the games coming up this weekend before we head into the international break, fire away. Welcome back. We're going to move on now from Liverpool against Manchester City. Now, elsewhere on this show's Facebook page, if you go to the Just One Thing I've recorded earlier on, I'll give you one key stat on each of the 10 matches this weekend. Right now, I'm going to zoom in on 4 of them in my weekend watch. Starting, as you could see earlier on, with Leicester City against Arsenal. Now, the Gunners could lose for a 3rd straight time at the King Power this weekend, especially if Jamie Vardy keeps up his goal-a-game record in the league against the Gunners. If that is the case, some say Unai Emery could be out of a job, so keep a very close eye on developments in the Saturday evening match. Right, okay, off to Old Trafford right now for United against Brighton. Now, this game at Old Trafford tends to end 1-0 to the home side. It has more often than not recently. So will the Seagulls boss Graham Potter actually decide to go for it this time around? And will he unleash both of his in-form strikers, Neil Maupay and Aaron Connolly, against a team that, let's face it, is no longer as intimidating as it once was at home? On now to the other end of the table, and possibly the season 6-pointer, as I'm saying here. We're almost a third of the way through the campaign, so let's call this a 6-pointer. The bottom 2 clubs meeting at Carrow Road. Now, both might have lost their scoring touch lately, but this is a fixture that traditionally delivers goals, so maybe a 6-goal thriller is on the cards then. Right, lastly, Spurs. Let's talk about them. They are a weekend team that wobbles after a midweek of strength, so will they find some form against a bullish Blades team? Spurs last won a Premier League game in September. They've won just 3 all season. 3 wins only this season, whereas Saturday's visitors Sheffield United have only lost 3. Harry Kane, outstanding in midweek as Spurs finally won away for the first time since early May. But he and his team must deliver a weekend performance if they are to escape the bottom half of the table. Right, that was my weekend watch. Let's turn our attention now to Fantasy Premier League. Here comes the FPL General. And the FPL General is, of course, Mark McGettigan, who joins us as ever to give us some insider thoughts on what might happen in Fantasy Premier League. Mark, thanks very much. I know that you, like the rest of us, are looking forward to Liverpool against Manchester City. We're about to put up the two clubs' top point scorers, but who would you, if anyone, trust in a game such as this?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one for fantasy managers. I think whichever City and Liverpool players you have, you just play them and hope for the best. If I had to choose, I think Mane could come out on top this weekend. And then in terms of City, I think Sterling and De Bruyne have been the most reliable this season. So I'm backing all three of those guys to be in the points this weekend.
Yeah, OK. Attacking players are what you're looking to there. You've been telling us for some time now about a player that you think everybody should have in their team, and that's John Lundstrom. I only just figured out that he's actually English, so I've been avoiding him in my all-English team. Silly me. It's incredible that he can get as many points as this, right?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, a brace, 21 points. He could have even had a hat-trick last weekend. He had another good chance as well. So I think it's come to the point now whereas we've got to ignore his price, just start him every week. Doesn't matter what the fixtures are. He's playing Spurs away this weekend. He's still going to be in my starting 11 this week. He's just too good.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Captaincy-wise, now, given what you said about not being entirely certain about what happens at Anfield, is there a standout captaincy pick elsewhere for you?
I think it's a very open week this week in terms of captaincy. There's a lot of options. It might be a good week to take a bit of a gamble. So I think I'm going to be on Jamie Vardy, home to Arsenal. Very poor Arsenal defence. I think Tammy's a good option, having a very good season, home to Crystal Palace. And Mane as well. I think there will be goals in that City-Liverpool game. And Mane's just on a different level this season. So I think all three of those are very viable. But there's others as well. It's a wide open week.
All right, brilliant stuff. Mark, whatever happens, have a good one before we go into that international break. And I'll see you again soon.
Good luck, everyone.
The thoughts there of the General. Let me just work our way through these fixtures, have a look at those, see where the teams are playing this weekend, remind ourselves what the league table looks at right now. And whilst you're glancing at all that, let me tell you that Edward Russell and the guys on Fox Sports FC are going to be coming along very shortly. And when they do so, they'll be coming along with a look ahead to the Classica in Germany and also a look at Juventus against AC Milan. You might want to consider some of the things you're seeing here. So much to look forward to this weekend in the Premier League. We'll wrap it all up as ever on Monday. Have a great weekend. See you then. Bye now.